Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Because today we are heading back over a century to the story of the Titanic.
A story that I'm sure we all think we know, right?
Exactly. It's practically become shorthand for epic disaster. Unsinkable ship hits iceberg, tragedy strikes, case closed, right?
Well, not so fast. You see, the Titanic is so much more than just a shipwreck. It's a time capsule, really, reflecting the ambitions and anxieties of the early 20th century.
A time capsule, I like that. And speaking of things frozen in time, can we talk about the sheer scale of the ship? 882 feet long, that's longer than 3 football fields. Imagine building something that massive back then.
It was an engineering marvel, no doubt about it. But more than that, the Titanic was a floating palace, a testament to the era's faith in progress. This was a time of incredible technological advancement, electricity, automobiles, even the radio was emerging. And the Titanic, with its luxurious amenities, embodied this sense of limitless possibility.
Right, you had those lavish dining rooms, a swimming pool, even a Turkish bath. Talk about luxury on the high
Oh,
seas.
and let's not forget the gymnasium. They even offered first-class passengers an electric camel to ride.
An electric camel. Okay, now that's an image I was not expecting today. But it wasn't all fun and games on board, was it? Because this ship, with all its grandeur, was also a microcosm of the society back then.
Absolutely. You had the creme de la creme in first class, millionaires and aristocrats rubbing shoulders. They dined on exquisite 7-course meals, while down below in steerage, passengers made do with much simpler fare. It's a stark reminder of the social inequalities of the time, a dynamic that played out tragically during the sinking.
And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting. What happened during those fateful hours on April 14th, 1912? How did a luxurious transatlantic voyage turn into one of history's most devastating tragedies? So it's the early hours of April 15th, 1912. The Titanic, on its maiden voyage, hits an iceberg.
An iceberg, can you imagine that? This majestic ship, this beacon of progress brought down by something so
Just basic. I mean, it's just frozen water, right?
Right, exactly. It really makes you think about the forces of nature. But, the tragedy wasn't just about the iceberg itself. The Titanic had vulnerabilities, design flaws that played a critical role.
You're talking about those watertight compartments, right? The ones that were supposed to contain flooding.
Exactly. In theory, those compartments should have bought them time, but,
Yeah.
well, they weren't high enough. Water could spill over from one to the next, and that sealed the Titanic's fate.
And then, of course, there's the issue of the lifeboats, or should I say, the lack thereof. Everyone knows there weren't enough for everyone on board, but what gets me is that so many weren't even full when they lowered them.
It's true. The Titanic had enough lifeboats for, get this, just over half the passengers and crew.
Half. Seriously.
Seriously. Regulations at the time didn't require more. It's a chilling example of how oversights, societal norms, and just plain human error can turn a crisis into a catastrophe. And, even with the lifeboats they did have, let's just say not all of them were filled to capacity.
I can't even begin to fathom the chaos of the panic as that ship started to go down. I mean, did it happen quickly? Or was it more of a slow descent?
That's what's so eerie. The Titanic did just disappear beneath the waves. It took over 2.5 hours from that initial impact to the final plunge.
2.5 hours.
2.5. Just imagine the decisions people had to make, the families being torn apart. But
Yeah.
also, the incredible acts of courage and selflessness in the face of certain doom.
It's like the band. They kept playing as the ship went down, right?
Oh. Exactly. The story of the Titanic's band has become almost legendary, hasn't it? It's just this poignant symbol of human resilience, even when facing the unimaginable.
Heartbreaking and inspiring all at the same time.
And I think that's part of what makes the Titanic story so enduring. This wasn't just a ship sinking. It was humanity caught in this extraordinary moment. Stories of lives lost, of heroism, of the strength of the human spirit.
And those stories, that tragedy, it sent shockwaves around the world, didn't it? It wasn't just a news event. It was something much bigger.
Absolutely. I mean, for one, it led to immediate changes in maritime safety regulations.
You're talking about things like the International Ice Patrol, right?
Uh-huh.
They still monitor iceberg activity to this day because of the Titanic.
Precisely. The sinking forced the world to acknowledge the risks of ocean travel in a whole new light. But it's bigger than that. The Titanic has had this profound cultural impact, this ripple effect that continues to this day. And that's what we're going to unpack next.
Okay, so we've talked about the Titanic as this technological marvel, a symbol of the social divides of the time, even as a catalyst for change in maritime safety. But what really gets me is how this one event over a century ago still has such a hold on us.
Oh, absolutely. The Titanic has become Well, it's more than just a history lesson, wouldn't you say? It's practically woven into our cultural DNA.
Totally. And you see it everywhere, right? Books, films, music, you name it. I mean, did you see that James Cameron movie, Titanic? Talk about a global phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely. And that movie with the historical details and then the fictionalized romance really captured the imagination, didn't it? It reignited this fascination with the Titanic. Suddenly there were all these documentaries, exhibitions. People even wanted to find the wreck.
Which they did, by the way. I mean, can you imagine in 1985 finding the Titanic on the ocean floor after all that time?
It's incredible, isn't it? And the thing is, each new discovery, each artifact they bring up, it just adds another layer to the story. It keeps us hooked.
Totally. But I think there's something else at play here. It's not just about the history or the ooh and ah finding the wreck. There's something about the Titanic that speaks to us on a deeper level.
I think you're right. You see, at its core, the Titanic story forces us to confront our own mortality.
Wow, yeah, you're right. It's a reminder that life is fragile, that even with all the technology in the world, tragedy can still strike.
Exactly. But, it's not all doom and gloom. Because within those stories of loss, there's also this incredible, this inspiring element of human resilience. Think about it. The band playing on, the passengers giving up their spots on lifeboats so others could survive. It's incredibly moving.
It really is, and I think that's what makes studying the Titanic so powerful. It's a reminder that even in the face of the worst imaginable tragedy, the human spirit, it finds a way to endure.
It does. And maybe that's the biggest lesson the Titanic teaches us, that even though we may be flawed, even though we face challenges and sometimes make terrible mistakes, there's still this incredible capacity for courage, for compassion, for hope. And that's something worth remembering, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's been quite a deep dive today, hasn't it? We haven't just explored the historical facts of the Titanic, but also, its lasting legacy and what it tells us about ourselves.
It's a story that continues to resonate, that's for sure.
It really is. And for the deep dive, this is your host, reminding you to stay curious and keep exploring.